here we are again, ladies and gentlemen, and we have 4 speakers for you as usual. Slightly longer presentations this time, so we might not have time for questions, but that's all right. Our next meeting isn't our next meeting. We're having a week off, so November the 1st, when we would normally be here, we're not having a meeting at all on November the 1st. So the next one will be November the 15th. And we'll have 3 or 4 people. We have Eileen Richardson, Brian Peters and Anne Lederman already listed for that one. We've got a slot for 1 more if anybody wants to volunteer themselves. Don't forget, if you're dialing in from abroad, that British summertime finishes next week. So we go back to Greenwich Mean Time, GMT. And if your summertime, if you have such a thing, doesn't stop as well, then we might be on an hour earlier than you expect. Is that right? An hour earlier or later? Earlier, I think.
That sounds confused. So I don't know how to figure that out, but because normally you come on at 11 o'clock my time. So next
we'll come on at 10 o'clock, but you just have to check what related you are to GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, or whatever they call it nowadays.
All right, I'll figure it out.
Begin
UTC.
to Carol and Gwilym. Over there a minute. There they are. Over to you, Carol.
Hi. Thank you, Steve. First of all, thanks to the TSF for giving us this opportunity to talk about our project, which we're very proud of. I'm here and Gwilym's here as well, my husband, to answer all the difficult questions. So we're going to go for the presentation. Just going to share the screen. There it is. And run the slideshow. Run the slideshow.
Yeah, that's it.
Find it. There we go.
Beginning.
Right. So, Glostrad, bringing heritage home. This is a question put to us by one of our friends. He wanted to sing a song from Gloucestershire, and he said, there aren't many songs from Gloucestershire, are there? Well, our answer was that there are many songs and dance tunes from Gloucestershire, but they were currently scattered in collections in archives across the UK and the US. So we were some of the first people to try and find a solution to this by bringing all this material together on a website which would be accessible. This was in the days before the EFDSS's Digital Archive project. Well, our first step was for a few of us to look for Christmas songs from Gloucestershire and construct a small pilot website with them to see if the idea was feasible. This is back one. There we go. This was the little website, with pilot website that we constructed, and we called it Gloucestershire Christmas. You can see it's got carols, it's got some things about mumming and wassailing, which is big in this area. Well, this seemed to work, so we took it to the next stage. A group of trustees was formed. These are the original trustees: Veronica Lowe, Stephen Gale, Charles Menteith, and Gwilym and myself. And then there was a lot of administration because we decided to approach the Heritage Lottery Fund for money to carry out the project. Well, the project was to be called the Single Gloucester, and the website we decided would be called Glostrad. Fortunately, they agreed to a 3-year programme, gave us some money, and we set to finding volunteers to carry out the research and transcription of the several hundred songs and tunes needed for the Glostrad website. We formed an important partnership with the Gloucestershire Archives and gained sponsorship from several different local organisations. These are some of our supporters to whom we will be eternally grateful for their cash funds that they gave us as well as support. So we found nearly 800 songs and nearly 700 tunes, traditional ones from Gloucestershire, some of which were previously unknown and sitting in private collections, including wassail songs. Now, these all needed transcription, so we held workshops to train volunteers in using ABC. Here are some of our noble volunteers at a workshop, learning all about how to transcribe into ABC. Here's another one. Most of you will know ABC, but here's an example for those that don't. It's a text format which is very good for transcribing music. So we then got some IT professionals in tow, Benjamin Doughty and Robin Davies, and then the website took shape. So what does it look like? Well, this is the home page part of it. It has useful tabs across the top to access parts of the website, such as news, the map, educational resources, publications, and podcasts. There are popular themes to search for, and it also has some areas that change: a song or tune of the day, added daily, and a recently added area. There's a link to our map facility and our Facebook page. This is the bottom half of the page. There's even a donate button. This is the map we have, where one can see what was sung or played where in Gloucestershire. So basically, you click on one of the little arrows there, and it shows you what was collected from that particular location. But the most important functions are the links to our search facilities. So let's see how this works in practice. There is a simple browse function where one can search fields for songs, tunes, performers, or collectors. The link to performers, you can see this is everything that's in the database listed on the left. So the link to performers, if you go to a performer, goes to this page where you can choose any person you want and find out what was collected from them and all about them. That will take you to this page. This is an example of one of the performer pages. These are the wassailers from Tetbury. Wassailing is very big in this area. Every village had its own wassail song, which was a very, very popular pursuit in Gloucestershire in days gone by. There's also an advanced search facility, very important, which we've recently added. And here one can search for a title of a song, type of music, a theme, a performer, collector, gender of artiste, or round number from pull-down menus. For example, a search on The Holly and the Ivy and Cecil Sharp will take you to this page. Here's the page of the song, The Holly and the Ivy, with some background of the song. There are things on the right which you can click on to go through to different aspects of the song, including, you'll notice at the top, some videos of performers who performed it, including Annie Lennox and the Medieval Babes. So it'll also take you to the musical notation for the song, which looks like this.
That's quite good.
The website not only presents the songs and dance tunes of Gloucestershire, but does so in a way that is designed to make them easy to take up, to learn, and to perform. Each song or tune has been transcribed by a volunteer into ABC format and checked by Gwilym or Veronica Lowe, and is then presented with musical notation and also a MIDI file to allow non-music readers to hear how it sounds. Notes by Gwilym and others are also included, showing what is known about the song and the collector who noted it down. Also notes by myself about the performer that it was originally collected from. Where available, original field recordings are also presented, and visitors to the site are encouraged to record their own performances to upload to the website. Each song also has a singing copy, which we call it. Where perhaps only one or two of the verses of a song were collected, for example by Cecil Sharp, verses are added from nearby versions to complete the song for performance. Also, perhaps the song was originally performed in a key which is out of the range of an average singer, in which case the key may be changed to make it easier to perform. We always emphasize where this has been done to keep it separate from the original. Here's an example of this, the original song as collected, and then a singing copy. Here's the female cabin boy as collected. You'll notice there's one verse, and that's it, basically. And this is a version which we've also put up, which was taken from a nearby version, has a complete song to sing with many verses. If you look at the bottom, it says tune and first verse collected from Mary Ann Clayton, remainder from another version. Versions of some of the songs have also been prepared by Matt Norman, Veronica Lowe and Sheila Macbeth for community choirs and for children's choirs. Here's another wassail song, this time from Sherdington, and on the right hand side you can see there are arrangements for choir. You can go and hear each individual part and also print off the music for the arrangement as well, because we wanted lots of people to be able to perform this music. Charles Menteith also transcribed, this is the choral version of this particular wassail song in two parts, as you can see. Yes, Charles Menteith also transcribed over 600 dance tunes from all sources, including some previously unpublished tune books. For example, this tune book was found in the attic of a cottage in Greet in Gloucestershire. This is 2 pages from the tune book. And in that tune book, there were many tunes. And here's the page for the tune book with a list of all the tunes that were written in that book, which you can then go in. They've been transcribed and you can also listen to them. So, having created the website, we then wanted to make sure that people of Gloucestershire knew about it and used it. So, publicity. We talked to local radio stations and others. And the Single Gloucester project also featured a series of events in which local performers gave their time to publicise the website, for which we are very grateful. Many people contributed to this aspect of the project. So, our events, what did we do? Concerts were held. This is our first little concert, a Harvest Home celebration in the village of Stanton, with lots of local performers. And then we had a concert given by a choir and child musicians at the Winchcombe Festival of Music and Arts. Here's the choir and the child musicians playing together. And here are the child musicians with some of their teachers performing local dance tunes, which are on the website. A major concert was also held at Stroud Folk Festival, featuring traditional singers, local performers, and the professional Bristol Cayley Quartet. This was called the Gloucester Blinder Concert. So here, Jeff and Elaine Gillett introducing the project and the concert. Lucky to have Richard Chidlaw and David Gardner, who are source singers and sang songs and performed things from their families. And here's the professional Bristol Cayley Quartet, who arranged some of the material on the website for their group. We also held a major West Country traditional music day in Gloucester, which included other professional musicians playing songs and tunes from the website. This is a wonderful event. That's the previous one. And then this is the West Country Traditional Music Day. Here we have Rob Harburn, Sam Sweeney, Miranda Rutter and Emily Portman, who again arranged some of the music on our website and gave us a great performance, together with many local singers who gave their services for free. So we also held road shows. Here are some local performers, Martin and Emma Bogwell, at the Nailsworth Festival doing a road show. You see the lottery funding thing in the background. And local group Puzzle Joke also performing at Nailsworth. And we gave some talks. This is the 2 of us giving a talk at the local Old People's organisation. They were really interested to know about their local songs. And we also held workshops as well, many workshops. This is a workshop Gwilym was giving at the Stroud Folk Festival, I think on wassailing, that particular
Probably.
one. This is Matt Norman doing a community choir workshop with some of his choral arrangements at Stroud Wassail. And then we went to various libraries and did a performance and a workshop for local people. This is at Newent, and this one's at Coleford in the Forest of Dean. Projects were also done in local schools to demonstrate the use of our material to teachers, including reconstructing children's games collected locally by Cecil Sharp. We also have lesson plans on the site to aid teachers in using our resources. Some lovely pictures of schools. This is Steve Rowley doing a project with Stone with Woodford Primary School, where they made a video of the ballad Edward. This is them rehearsing it, preparing to make the video, and acting in the school field, and having a lovely time generally. So this is children from Stone School. These are children from Isbourne Valley School in Gloucestershire doing a children's game, acting out a local children's game. So we've also, the things we've done, funded the publication of 3 books which showcase our material. There's A Bowl of the Best, which is the choral arrangements by Matt Norman, Sheila Macbeth and Veronica Lowe of songs for school and community choirs. Really Beautiful Company, my book which features the singers and musicians of Gloucestershire. And Let Us Be Merry, book of Christmas songs from Gloucestershire, edited by Gwilym and Roy Palmer. After the end of the funding period, we have continued to add material. It's still being found on a voluntary basis. This website is aimed to be a long-term facility to preserve the song and music heritage of Gloucestershire. So a dedicated standalone terminal for the full collection has been set up in the Gloucestershire archives with 2 access points, and much Gloucestershire material has also been passed over to the archives. A legacy group has been formed which is perpetuating the website on completion of the 3-year single Gloucestershire project. Here is the access point at the archives. Robin Burton, Eleanor Telfer and Becky Dello will also be helping us take things forward. An IT professional has been recruited to take on the future maintenance and development of the website, and we are continuing to add songs and tunes to the website. So, to summarise, the Single Gloucester project and the Glostrad website aim to get the people of the county singing their songs and playing their tunes. These are their musical heritage. And we have had good feedback so far, with positive feedback from relatives of the singers and musicians who've sometimes given us new photographs of the singers. And I leave you with this slide, which actually gives us some of the feedback from the relations that we who heard their ancestors singing on the website. And that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent, Carol. Thank you very much. Can I just, I mean, as I said, we don't have time for questions, but how many people have used the site? Have you been pleased with the number of users?
We don't have exact numbers, but I know that many people, we know that many people have viewed it and continue to view it, which is the important thing. I think that it's not just the project lasted for 3 years, and it's not just over those 3 years, people continue to view it. So we're really happy.
We do get a lot of emails in from relatives and also from song researchers that are interested in a particular song. I don't know what the take-up. There was a lot of take-up by performers. I'm not sure what there is currently, though.
We haven't got recent figures, but we know it's good.
The figures are there, but I'm not very good at reading them on the interpreting them. The charts.
Excellent. Thank you, Carol and Gwilym. That was a great start to today. We're going to move on to Patience. Patience, yeah, yes, there you are, Patience. Don't forget to unmute yourself. Have to unmute, Patience. We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Yes, here we go. Hello. No, I'm sorry. I have my PowerPoint. I'm just trying to find it. And I have it on the screen. Here we go. There we go. There we go. How's that?
Right, that looks good.
Okay, so here we go. Picturing protest, prints to accompany political songs. I have been editing Dick Holdstock's anthology of radical songs. When his publisher offered that there may be page space here and there for pictures, I went right to work on that possibility. The songs date from the 1760s. Here's Dick's book, coming out next year. The songs date from the 1760s, the time of John Wilkes and liberty, to the 1860s. With vigor, humor, bitterness, and hope, they reflect an important era of the democratic fight for representation, dignity, and justice. My challenge for this late phase of editing Dick's book was to find authentic and appropriate images to suit the songs. The book is in chronological order. This talk is not. I set out with certain criteria for selection. The first one, contemporary to the time. The song The Genius of Britain concerns the great naval strike of 1797. The center of that action was the Queen Charlotte, a man-of-war anchored at Spithead. This print, a portrait of that grand ship with all her crew manning the yards to salute the admiral coming aboard, was issued only months before the strike began. It would have quickly taken on new meaning in the print market. The many modern images relaying historic images do not interest me. I am interested, however, in pictures of historic events that appeared in print up to 1868. The recreation of near-legendary stories, such as of Father Murphy in the Irish Rebellion of 1798, reflects both on the subject and its later interpretation. This portrayal of Murphy may be inaccurate, but his fervor was caught well, and this speaks of both 1845, when it was published, and 1798. Thomas Spence, a contemporary of Thomas Paine, made little sketches to promote reform. If the law requires it, I will walk thus. The Song of the Lower Classes was written by Ernest Jones a half-century later, but its words echo Spence's drawing. We're far too low to vote the tax, but not too low to pay. An African's Appeal to the British Nation is one of several songs tracking the plight of the dislocated African. Equiano, who won his freedom and went on to work for reform, here represents the many people who overcame servitude. These words, not his, are from the song. I speak to Britons, Britons then behold, a man by Britons snared and seized and sold. I've paired this French caricature of Edmund Burke with the song Edmund Burke to the Swinish Multitude. This sort of insult is common today, but perhaps only a foreigner could have made such an unflattering portrait of a leading British statesman. The lyrics suggest that Burke was quite as smug as shown here. Give over your grunting, be off to your sty, nor dare to look out if a king passes by. Criterion number 2, black and white, or will reproduce well in black and white. Cheap and common images, such as those on broadsides, were monochrome, black ink on plain paper. This was also true of prints made for an elite market. Engravings, etchings, or early lithographs were also printed in black on a finer grade of paper than hand-colored. Each sheet differed from the next. This etching from 1812 may pair with the song General Ludd's Triumph, but it was intended to be satirical, whereas the song is not. A word on lithography. This process altered printmaking forever. Printed first from stones, then from zinc plates, lithographs could replicate crayon lines, ink washes, and soft effects not possible with engraving. A rare find was this lithograph of the Newport Rising, the attack of the Chartists on the Westgate Hotel. The artist James Mullock, born and died in Newport, may well have witnessed this scene at the age of 21 and drew this print soon thereafter. A word on photography. The Crimean War of the 1850s was the first war documented in photographs. These tend to feature officers, not the suffering infantry. I chose this one to convey the bitter and enduring aftermath of that conflict. Young men maimed for life. Number 3, not cluttered with text. This cartoon would not be good. I use the word cartoon for such panels of any date, although the term was not used for comic drawings until the 1840s. John Bull in the year 1800 and in 1801 is a humorous take on the Treaty of Amiens. The sluggish soldier under the heading War and the hearty fiddler under Peace tell the story without needing small text. This cartoon supports the tenor of the lyrics of On Peace, which are both sincere and, as Dick writes, naively optimistic. This cartoon by George Cruikshank, though full of text, is a contender for the book jacket. Liberty Suspended with the Bulwark of the Constitution appeared in 1817 when new gagging acts restricted people's rights and taps many of the book's themes. My sole qualm is that the central character is against reform, not one of our heroes. Standing on the platform of the British press is Robert Stewart, the Viscount Castlereagh. He gestures to the hanging and gagged figure of liberty who holds the Magna Carta, Bill of Rights, and habeas corpus. He lofts her cap of liberty and says, "It is better to do this than to stand prostrate at the feet of anarchy." At the right, the funeral of British liberty passes by, and John Bull weeps. While it works in black and white, it would not read well in small size. Number 4, simple composition, good in small scale. Where there may be room for pictures in this book, they will be small in space below lyrics or notes. They need to carry their message simply. My first great find was George Cruikshank's sketch for a satirical monument, Victory of Peterloo. It fit all 5 criteria. It reads like an emblem, direct and succinct. It is also deeply ominous. Other emblems that may appear in the book include the medallion of the British Anti-Slavery Society, designed by Josiah Wedgwood, and the United Irish Crest. Black and white is no guarantee of clarity. These 2 versions of this bookplate refer to the swing riots of 1830. A farmer pleads, a woman dies, children cry, and hayricks burn. The legendary Captain Swing is not mentioned in the song, Present Times, or 8 shillings a week, but is discussed in Dick's notes for it. Speaking of swing, the Talpotal martyrs are revered by British workers, but there is a dearth of known songs about them, and they are only alluded to in the prose song John Bull and the Unions. Do we honor them with this grand image of a huge trade unionists' rally to protest their sentences, or show the men themselves as identified in Cleve's Penny Gazette? The Tradesman's Lament concerns a potato famine in Ireland, the potato famine. Which image better captures the plight of the Irish? The restless crowd at the workhouse, or the waif in rags bending to dig? Or this one, closer to the lyrics? It nearly breaks my heart when my cottage I behold. It is claimed by another who has plenty of gold, and I, passing by, shivering with cold, Old Ireland, what have you come to? Criterion 5 suits the song. In the Countryman's Frolic, or Humors of an Election, a country fellow who, like most men, could not vote, visits the Covent Garden hustings, finding the scene curious and overwhelming. For the famed election of 1784, Georgiana, the Duchess of Devonshire, offered kisses in exchange for votes. Thomas Rowlandson's print is straight out of this song's lyrics. What does it avail now of promising votes, for a Devonshire kiss is in an instant turncoats? The lyrics for Old Middlesex Burdett and Freedom Forever, an 1802 campaign song for Francis Burdett, are hearty and spirited, as is this print of his campaign 4 years later. Dick's notes tell us more about Freedom Forever. Burdett championed prison reform and had worked to release a military officer wrongly confined for years in Coldbath Fields. Should we catch the fervor of the campaign song or catch the chill of an unjust prison sentence? This song and print seem made for each other, and perhaps they were. The title, with its 3 marks echoing the silhouettes, may have been all over the news after the Nottingham riots of 1831. The song is short and poignant. This simple image will carry its grim message at any size. Harrison, Beck, and Armstrong boldly met their fates beneath the tree. Villains swore against them coldly, and their doom we all shall see. Another grim story, not at first obvious in this valiant image, was of Richard Parker, a spokesman in the Great Naval Mutiny of 1797, who was sentenced to die. The song, President Parker, told from his wife's point of view, relates her plight to see him alive and then to properly bury him. The image is cautionary. Parker gestures to his own corpse hanging from the yardarm. The print was issued mere days after he was sentenced to die. He didn't actually hang, he cheated the hangman and jumped from a height to his death. Napoleon. Dick includes some wistful pro-Napoleon songs. Grand paintings depict Napoleon's heroic victories, but images of his 2 exiles are less common. These 2 are from English artists. The HMS Northumberland and HMS Myrmidon escorted him to St. Helena. This evocation of exile from Benjamin Robert Hayden suits the lyrics. He may sigh to the wind by the great Mount Diana, with his eyes o'er the waves that surround St. Helena. The fatal English Poor Law Bill concerns the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834. The song does not name the dreaded workhouses where families were housed by gender and age, but Dick discusses them in his notes. I found no early images of the destitute people such as described in the lyrics, but this plain rendering of a workhouse represents their harsh circumstances. If for relief you're forced to go, they'll part, I do declare, the father and the mother from the infant children dear. James Gilray's very busy cartoon, The Republican Attack, refers to the pop gun plot found out. It may not work in black and white and small, but the song jabs at fake news of its day, and Gilray got it just right. For had it pierced his royal paunch, he surely had been dead, sir, though possibly he'd not been hurt if it had struck his head, sir. Punch magazine, first published in 1841, coined the term cartoon for a comic or satirical drawing. This one from 1866 captures the strength of a political cartoon to weave together persons and issues in an unlikely situation to spark sly wit and raise discourse. These lyrics are from The Great Battle for Freedom and Reform. With Gladstone, Russell, Beals, and Bright, we shall weather through the storm to give the working man his rights and gain the bill reform. The issues raised in Dick's book are with us today and globally: freedom and justice, voting rights, unfair labor practices, mass demonstrations, fake news, political shenanigans. None of these choices are firm. I welcome all comments and corrections. And I had intended to lay out for you the factors to secure image rights for publishing, but I didn't have time to do that. If there's interest, I'll be glad to give a presentation on that topic in the future. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Patience. Wow. I wish we all had a picture researcher to go on our books. It make me very jealous. That was really splendid.
Well, I'll be available after Dick's book is out.
Right. Fair enough. We'll all queue up for you.
Steve,
yeah.
Could I just say to KG, you haven't been keeping an eye on the chat, but in 2 minutes I will be ejecting you for not having your full screen name.
Shame on you, KG. No, I haven't got. We've still got your screen, I think. That's it. Thank you, Patience. That was wonderful. So we're moving on to Karen. Karen McAulay, unmute. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes.
Right, I'll share my screen now then, just coming up.
Right, we have it.
We have it. There we are. That's it. Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon. I'm going to talk about Alexander Campbell, who's a Scottish song collector from the early 19th century, who I had the pleasure of researching for quite a lot during my PhD. So here goes. Alexander Campbell was the compiler of the 2-volume Albyn's Anthology, which was published in 1816 and 18. He based his collections largely on the tour of the Highlands and Islands that he made in search of Scottish traditional songs in 1815. He covered most of his journey on foot, apart, of course, from ferries and rowing boats between the isles. In 2008, whilst I was completing my doctoral thesis on historical Scottish song collecting, I was invited to go and talk about Campbell to the young traditional musicians at Plockton Centre of Excellence for Traditional Music. To get the whole Alexander Campbell experience, I'd have liked to have taken those teenage traditional musicians outdoors into untamed countryside with the rain pouring down, a rough footpath under their feet, probably no map, and certainly no mobile phone. However, I visited Plockton under a gloriously sunny, cloudless blue sky and only had an hour before lunch on a Sunday morning. The best I could do was to ask them to use their imaginations as I shared the story of Alexander Campbell with them. Can I likewise invite you to exercise your imagination this afternoon? Campbell has been described as Scotland's first ethnomusicologist. This may not be strictly accurate, but Joseph MacDonald compiled his collection a good half-century earlier, but Campbell was the first on record to expend so much physical effort on his collection. Originally from Tomby, northwest of Callander, he was proud to call himself a Highlander and a Gaelic speaker. By the time he reached adulthood, he had moved to Edinburgh and had singing lessons with Tenducci, the famous Italian singer. A music teacher and organist, Campbell also wrote about Scottish poetry and places, studied medicine at the University of Edinburgh, but never seems to have practiced as a doctor, and once made what has been described as a financially disastrous venture into farming. He also married a woman who was very much older than him, and so a friend said that they could neither live together nor apart. Like the Campbell's more serious concerns, he knew of the Highland clearances, and in 1804 he published a poem called The Grampians Desolate, in which he complained about the plight of Highlanders. This book-length poem was a fundraiser for a charity that he set up. And I've just shown a picture of this here to save me flapping a book in front of the screen. I'm afraid mine's only a modern copy, but not to worry. At what he considered the old age of 51, oh, hang on, where's my screen gone?
Your screen.
I've lost it. Come back.
Can't have
Right.
gone far.
So I don't know what happened there.
Gone again.
This is weird. Okay, there it is. It says share the screen, and I'm going to that. Aha.
Right, we have it. Yes.
Now we've got it. There we go. So we've got the advertisement which says that he's raising money for the poor in the Highlands. There we go. At what he considered the old age of 51, Campbell embarked upon a song collecting tour of the Highlands and Western Isles. We don't know the circumstances behind his decision to set out on a 3-month trip in late July, when anyone who knows Scottish summers would have thought it better to have set off in May. Campbell kept a diary of his trip, calling it a slight sketch of a journey made through parts of the Highlands and Hebrides. And as I've said here, on the 23rd July 1815, I took my place as an outside passenger on the mail coach to Stirling. On my arrival there, I armed and apparelled myself in the ancient costume of my native mountains and set forward for Lenrick Castle. Although he sometimes had company, just as often we find him tramping in the mud, falling down hills or slipping into turbulent streams all by himself. He hurt his leg quite badly more than once, but rested up for a day or so and then moved on. Towards the end of his trip, he was plainly getting tired and fed up, but his spirits lifted on the homeward stretch. Let's pause to meet a couple of influential Scotsmen now. 50 years before Campbell's tour, the Gaelic-speaking poet James Macpherson published the works of Ossian, son of Fingal, in 1765. His poetry was in English, but he claimed to have translated it from the Gaelic, having gathered together and reconstructed ancient Gaelic poems and fragments by the bard Ossian, all about Fingal and his heroic exploits. Fingal was said to have roamed the Highlands in around the 3rd century, and the poems were mainly handed down orally from generation to generation. Macpherson said he collected his materials from Highlanders encountered during his own poem collecting tour. And I'm just going to show you a video clip of a book about Ossian, a modern book. If you wanted to know what the Ossian poems were like, this would be a good place to start. So this is giving you an example of what it sounds like. Autumn is dark on the mountains. Grey mist rests on the hills. The whirlwind is heard on the heath. Dark rolls the river through the narrow plain. A tree stands alone on the hill and marks the grave of Connell. The leaves whirl round with the wind and strew the grave of the dead. At times are seen the ghosts of the deceased when the musing hunter alone stalks slowly over the heath. And let's have a quick look at the preface while we're here. Where it reads, "The public may depend on the following fragments as genuine remains of ancient Scottish poetry. The date of their composition cannot be exactly ascertained. Tradition in the country where they were written refers to them to an era of the most remote antiquity." Highland society, indeed people all over Scotland, England and Europe, went crazy about these poems, retranslating them into other languages and even much later on back into Gaelic. It was stirring stuff about rugged mountains, misty glens, stormy weather and turbulent streams with plenty of heroic exploits. Only 7 years after the works of Ossian were published, explorer Louis Albert Necker de Saussure discovered the caves on Staffa and was told they were the caves of Fingal. On a practical level, tourism as an industry can be said to have started around this time, and literally hundreds of tour guides were being written. The association of the caves with the great Ossianic hero fanned the flames of interest in the Hebridean Islands. Travel writers were enchanted with the romance and grandeur of the caves, particularly with the echo effect in Fingal's cave. Travellers would take their own piper with them by boat to hear the sound resonate around the caves. Back in 2008, I recreated this trip with my reluctant family, only to discover a little boy playing Highland Cathedral on the accordion in the cave. Literary experts were unconvinced that the poems were genuine, and after Macpherson's death, the Highland Society of Scotland began an inquiry, members travelling to the Highlands and Islands attempting to meet the people who had given Macpherson his original Gaelic poems. Amidst the growing interest in Scottish poetry and songs in general, our Alexander Campbell was anxious to preserve his heritage, writing first a book about Scottish poetry and then a travel guide, long before he started his song collection. His Introduction to the History of Poetry in Scotland appeared in 1798-9, and believing the Ossian poems to be genuine, he wrote a chapter defending them, arguably less harsh a judge than some of the experts in the Highland Society of Scotland. His tour guide journey from Edinburgh through parts of North Britain followed in 1802, and my next slide shows that book. This one was a Christmas present, so I'm rather proud of it. Here we go. Just have a very, very quick look. I think my volume had an interesting past, but I really don't mind. And I'll just turn it around so that you can see what the pictures look like. Okay. Campbell's real ambition was to compile a collection of Highland songs, and he asked the Highland Society of Scotland to help finance this. The Society provided the funds, but stressed that they were not commissioning the research, just helping him fund the trip. Campbell was fortunate that an influential member of the nobility helped him to plan his itinerary, and here we see Sir John MacGregor Murray, a committed member of the Highland Society of Scotland, who had already been instrumental in getting an earlier collection of Highland tunes published, the Patrick MacDonald collection, and significantly he had been amongst the individuals visiting the Highlands and Islands in 1800, trying to trace the sources of Macpherson's verses. Sir John had already had an illustrious career with the East India Company. He had also become clan chieftain of the MacGregors and had petitioned to have the prescription of the MacGregor name lifted, so he was undoubtedly a gentleman of both determination and position. But if there was one prevailing and notable characteristic about Sir John, it was his predilection for recording histories and cultures. He spent much time researching his own family history, and whilst in India, commissioned munshis, in other words, Indian secretaries, to write lengthy manuscripts for the East Indian Company about customs and procedures in the regions where he was stationed. This isn't him, this is just a picture showing what it might have been like at the time. At around this time, he also raised funds to finance a Gaelic edition of the Ossian Tales, although legal means subsequently had to be used to recover the funds from the deceased Macpherson's family, since the author failed to produce his Gaelic translation. So as you see, he had his finger in quite a lot of pies, all connected with record keeping or cultural history. And I've listed them here. We've got Joseph MacDonald's piping manual. We've got him as a dedicatee to Patrick MacDonald's Highland vocal airs, the fundraising for the Gaelic edition, the Highland Society's Ossian investigation in which he took part. The Highland Society of Scotland also started a dictionary project, which he was involved with. The Highland Society of London did a tartan register in 1815. Yes, he was involved with that too. He sent his clan tartan. And then later on, the MacGregors were in a key role at the King's Jaunt in 1822, when the King went to Edinburgh. Anyway, we better get back to Campbell. By the time Campbell met Sir John, he was old and had retired to Lanrick Castle, north of Stirling, where he was able to indulge his passions for the Gaelic language and Highland culture, and he became even more involved with the Highland Societies of Scotland and London. So in 1815, Campbell started his journey by visiting Lanrick Castle, north of Stirling, and where Sir John wrote him a number of letters introducing him to knowledgeable people in Mull, Staffa, Benbecula, North and South Uist and Skye. Without this help, Campbell would have had much more difficulty getting to meet the right people. Staying overnight, Campbell set off for Stirling and then Callander the following day, and Sir John unsurprisingly set off to judge a piping competition in Edinburgh under the auspices of the Highland Society of Scotland. Starting in Stirling in Perthshire, Campbell went westward to the Gaeltacht coast, travelling from Connell near Auburn to the Isles of Lismore, Mull and Iona. He went by boat from Tobermory, the northern tip of Mull, to North Uist. He travelled to South Uist and the Isles of Barra and Fattassay before returning to North Uist. From here he headed for the Isle of Harris, going by the tiny Isle of Killigrew on his way to Skye. His island hopping took in Raasay and Scalpay before he headed back for the mainland, arriving at Glenelg, some 55 miles due north of Connell. Note that he didn't go near Lewis, probably because James Macpherson hadn't done so. Johnson and Boswell, who were among the first to try to retrace Macpherson's footsteps, didn't go to Lewis, and Campbell's advisor Sir John MacGregor Murray may also not have been there. Glengarry, Inverlochy near Fort William, Ballachulish and Inverurin marked his return to Stirlingshire. He stopped off again at Lanrick Castle to show off his collection to Sir John, walked to Stirling, then took the mail coach home to Edinburgh. I might add that in this presentation I did try to put his itinerary onto the PowerPoint, but it was going to take too many screens to show you it all, so I've spared you. Sometimes Campbell stayed with the people that he met, and other times he stayed at inns. One night, when stuck for a bed, he ended up sleeping on a bundle of hay in a weaver's cottage. With no modern communication methods, he couldn't be sure that the people he was visiting would be at home when he got there. On one occasion, he found his clergyman host had gone out. Campbell was grateful for a stiff glass of cognac, he doesn't spell it quite like that, when eventually the minister came home. Campbell lived in times when class distinction was much greater than anything we've ever come across, but he was clearly happy to mix with people of all ranks of society. He met a lot of people who were quite comfortably off, as well as church ministers and a few priests, the people that Sir John MacGregor Murray would have met on his own trip. At pre-arranged gatherings, Campbell met people who would perform for him, or individuals would be sent in order for him to take down tunes. So he went to dances, dinners, social evenings, and listened to all kinds of people singing songs and reciting poems. Gentry and military men, servants and field workers, boatmen, a weaver and a cabinet maker, beside amateur violinists and various pipers. And he too was treated to the effect of Staffa's piper playing The Lament for the Slain in Fingal's Cave. He even met a man who played his Jew's harp for him. And a diligent networker, he made people promise to forward any extra information they could later find. In 1815, as now, traditional musicians set great store by the history of the tunes they performed. Campbell encountered an old man who was the 22nd male representative of the MacPherish family, formerly the hereditary bards to the family of Clanranald. And another time he collected songs from the grandson of MacOdrum, who was called the celebrated bard of North Uist. Bagpipe music was transcribed from Captain Neil MacLeod of Gesto, who'd learnt it from the McCrimmons of Skye. Campbell also heard brilliant piping by the elderly Lieutenant Donald McCrimmon, described as the 11th in succession of the McCrimmons, and collected harp music, which came indirectly from Murdoch MacDonald, the last harper to the Laird of Cole, who had died 76 years previously. These were transcribed, from whom Campbell does not say, by Margaret MacLean Clephane, whom Campbell had hoped to see, but she was getting married to the Marquis of Compton in Edinburgh at the time. Campbell observed that harp music could still be heard in the Highlands and Western Isles. Indeed, he had heard young ladies playing an improved harp. Campbell wished that harp music could be revived and the ancient order of harpers re-established in Scotland. However, part of his enjoyment of the harp was purely aesthetic. He thought young ladies' figures were displayed to best advantage when playing the harp. Growing more selective as time went by, he spent one particular evening listening to a weaver singing, and I quote, song after song, luniac after luniac, interspersed with many stories of considerable length and various merit. Most of the pieces I had heard repeatedly in Lochaber and other Highland districts. He gathered fiddle music, pipe tunes, harp airs, and tunes that he described as pretty national melodies, sometimes played on the piano, which he had to tune for them. His collection included short songs, ancient love songs, rowing songs, mouth music, Gaelic poetry, some of which he declared to be Ossianic fragments, later writing of tracing the steps of our Celtic Homer, and for each piece he took down, he repeated them back to the performer who authenticate them. There's no mention of his carrying an instrument. After just the first month, he noted that in Mull he had gleaned 47 original melodies, mostly vocal, with a stanza or two of the original words to each, the plan I uniformly followed in order to identify the songs to which they are chanted. Now, 12 months after his return to Edinburgh, he was to make another music collecting tour, the Scottish Borders, in October 1816, again starting to log the trip, but this tour was curtailed by illness after 3 weeks. He had covered a circle, roughly defined by the Borders towns of Peebles, Ettrick, Hawick, Jedburgh and Melrose that time, and he spent time with James Hogg and Sir Walter Scott, besides taking detailed notes about famous Borders pipers from Sir Walter Scott's uncle, Mr. Thomas Scott. The second volume of Albine's anthology was not meant to be the final one. He never published his intended third volume. His collections met with a mixed reception and did not achieve a great popularity in their day, probably due to the fact that his arrangements left much to be desired. Campbell tried to write simple, I quote, classical song settings, but sometimes breaks some of the most basic rules that classical musicians would follow today. This does raise questions about the level of musicianship that he had, regardless of the fact that he'd trained with an eminent singer and worked as a professional musician. Nonetheless, he knew what he was looking for. He believed he could spot an authentic Highland melody, and he thought he could tell the difference between a Highland and a Lowland melody. Nonetheless, he did preserve a lot of songs that might otherwise have been forgotten. From a musical point of view, the tunes make good source material, and musicians nowadays make their own settings of them. Now, the next slide is a video clip where I've just flicked through my own title-less copy. This is the front page of the copy that I've got. So here we have the beginning of his preface. It's quite a long preface, and he talks a lot about Scottish music. He talks about the scales, as you can see here. And then I'm just going to turn forward to the end of the preface. I won't try and show you page after page. So as you see, it goes up to page 9, and he finishes by thanking the people who've given him particular help, including Sir John MacGregor Murray, as I've mentioned. He's got a contents page which tells you not only the first line of the text, also the author of the words and the airs that they were set to. And then we'll just look at the first tune that comes up. So this is the Auburn-HAIR'D Bonny Day. In a minute, I'll show you a rendition of the song, not me singing it, just one that I've put together on the computer, so that you can hear exactly what his arrangement is like. And as well as the music itself, over on the other side are all the words. So we've got the English words, we've got the author, we've got a few notes about the piece, and then we've got a Gaelic translation as well, just here. Okay, let's move on to the next screen. This is the audio, so I hope it works for you. And that brings me to the end of my talk. I'd like to thank you very much for your interest, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you've got. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Excellent. I might have missed this. Did you say that whether his manuscripts are anywhere?
Well, there are some manuscripts in the National Library of Scotland, but there isn't a manuscript that exactly correlates to the book. The book itself, there are copies in several libraries. I managed to pick up my volume 1 secondhand. So it's quite possible to see. I'm not sure whether there's one digitally in the National Library of Scotland. I can't remember. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
So volume 3, is that lost forever then?
Volume 3 didn't happen, to the best of my knowledge. There's no trace of it. There's only 2 volumes known, but I did read that he was intending to write a 3rd.
Right. Well, great. Thank you, Karen. Very interesting. And of course, we've now got Maurice Leyden. Now, some of you will be surprised because I left him off the list that was circulated earlier on in the week. But Maurice is going to talk about weavers, bleachers, and drapers and their songs, I hope. So over to you, Maurice and Jane.
Okay. Just share. Oh, I have to share your computer. We're just getting this together here. And then share. Okay. And then
Yep, we have that.
slideshow.
Some people, before you start, Maurice, the black line has now disappeared. That's good.
And I want to play it from the beginning. So that's us. Good.
Okay. So, good afternoon to you all. I'm going to talk about songs from the Ulster linen industry, focusing on 3: Young McCance, the County of Tyrone, and the Bleacher and the Weaver, all of which date from around 1800, sort of slightly before and slightly after. Now, the greatest technological development of the early 18th century was the discovery of water power and the harnessing of its energy to drive newfangled machinery. Legal rights to waterways were critical to the success of their endeavours. Leases in perpetuity were eagerly sought, quote, as long as water runs and grass grows, unquote. Numerous flax mills, bleach mills, lapping sheds, drying barns, and beetling mills were built along the banks of the River Bann and the Lagan Valley during the 18th century. Water was a recurring topic in the songs. Rippling waters, the purling stream, a large murmuring river, or pure flows the crystal stream. The Industrial Revolution at this stage was 50 years away. So the first song is Young McCance, one of the most wealthy and successful of the Ulster linen barons. The McCances came from Scotland to Ulster in the late 17th century. They quickly established themselves in the burgeoning linen industry. By 1876, they owned 452 acres of land, which they used for growing flax and bleaching, or as they called it, grassing their linen, in the open air during the summer months. They owned luxurious mansions, as we see from the pictures, at Farmhill, Glenhill, Roselands and Suffolk, a few miles distant from Dunmurry, County Antrim. Now, John McCance, 1772 to 1835, married 3 times. Maria Finlay died after the birth of the first son, Gwilym. Jane Russell died childless, and Sarah Law, with whom he fathered 10 children, 6 sons and 4 daughters. In 1801, he became a Belfast magistrate. In 1821, he joined the private bank of Orr, Sloane and Montgomery, which eventually became the Northern Bank in 1824 and which is still in existence in Northern Ireland. By 1825, he was High Sheriff of County Down and Antrim. He stood as a Whig candidate in the Belfast parliamentary elections in 1835 and won the seat. Hunting and horse racing were the favourite pastimes. He owned 2 race horses, but he died of a bilious fever in London in 1835 while on parliamentary business. John and Abraham Hume resided in Kilwarlen near Hillsborough, County Down. They were ardent song collectors in the first half of the 19th century. They accumulated some 100 song texts consisting of local miscellaneous 18th century songs, political songs and music hall and drawing room songs. John migrated to Belfast while Abraham studied at Belfast and Dublin and became a Church of England clergyman in one of the more deprived areas of Liverpool. The late Dr. Hugh Shields has written 2 informative articles on these songs. Quote, some songs and ballads in the use of the province of Ulster, 1845, and some songs and ballads in use in the province of Ulster, 1845 text. The Abraham Hume collection resides in the Birmingham University Library. Sam Henry, 1878 to 1952, compiled the Songs of the People book, published a version of the song entitled Drummond's Land, with a melody on the 3rd of August 1927. It was collected from Mrs. M.C. McCaig Tullahan's Dunloy and Mrs. Charles Moore, Ballymacfin, Stranocum, County Antrim. The song was also known as Davies Mountain or David's Flowery Vale, and a Dr. J.S. Crone heard a version of the song sung by mill girls at Killead, County Antrim in 1860. The song is still being sung. This is Young McCance. At the foot of Davies Mountain, my dwelling is to be seen, where there runs a clear purling stream beside my father's green, well covered o'er with linen cloth which was wrought around Tandregee, and purchased by young McCance and a boy called Darby Gray. As I walked out one morning to view my father's men, the Armagh coach came rolling in, well loaded to the ground. I put my spyglass to my eye and viewed her round and round, and on the front seat of the coach sat a damsel of renown. Says I, my handsome fair one, if you and I agree, we shall take the Armagh coach and Drummond's land we'll see. 500 pounds in ready gold on your father I will bestow, and I'll crown you queen of the Lomond's land this night before I go. As I walked out that evening down through my father's land, was not I a clever fellow with my fusee in my hand? I might have had sweethearts plenty, had I but known my fate. I'm young McCance, I come from the Falls, you know my fortune is great. Young McCance.
Oh, as I went out a walking, one fine summer's morning, I met an old man as he been walking alone. I asked him if he directed me to where I get protection, and he told me to travel on to Stroud County, Tyrone. But when I got into Newry, it was there I fell a courting with a hearty young fellow, had a wife of his own. He said he would take me, and he'd never forsake me. And after some time we could get married where there's no one would know. Oh, but
my parents often told me that ne'er could control me. They would make me the draper of I'd stay at home, but I still had a notion for higher promotion. I would see for their part, nor the county at Tyrone. I then came to Newry, where I heard a fadlock curtain. A bonny a wee girl for a wife of me own, but she would not hear me, nor yet would come near me. For she said I was married in the county of Tyrone.
The County of Tyrone is the song you've been listening to. Two versions there, one from Lal Smith and Robert Cinnamon. Now, the County of Tyrone was one of the most popular songs of the 19th century, judging by the number of references in the Stroud collection, 132 odd. And it was continually published in England on ballad sheets. I think I have about 9 different publishers from London, Birmingham, Preston, though London had most and all had broadly similar text. A version of the song was collected by the Hume brothers, whom I talked about earlier, whom I have already mentioned. Yeah, it was similar to other versions collected in the 1920s in the County Antrim by Sam Henry under the title of Bold McGuinness, or McGuinness from the County of Tyrone, or Sweet Jane of Tyrone. The rhymes in the song indicate that the writer in the 18th century had a Gaelic melody structure and metre in his head when composing the song in the English language. There is alliteration, assonance, imperfect vowel rhyme and internal rhyming, which mirror the metre of songs in the Irish language. Some Gaelic speakers in the 19th century were critical of this form of song. William Carleton, 1794 to 1869, writer and novelist, remembered what his mother had to say when she was asked to sing the English version of Ban and Ferrua, the red-haired man's wife. Quote, "I'll sing it for you, but the English words in the air are like a quarrelling man and wife. The Irish melts into the tune, but the English doesn't." Unquote. In Belfast, 1952, some Irish tinker singers were recorded by Peter Kennedy and Dan O'Neill's Lonan. Lal Smith sang a version of the song on Folk Tracks 167, and the sleeve notes included the following. Travellers from Southern Ireland singing around a campfire in Belfast in July 1952 resulted in some remarkable recordings of their style from the pretty young tinker girls. By the early hours of the morning, the men were under the spell of the Guinness, leaving the younger girls, some breastfeeding, as they sang tightly, grasping the microphone one by one and competing with each other in their display of vocal decorations in the love songs. Unquote. The melody for the County Tyrone was collected in Belfast by Arthur Bunting from a J. McCracken Esquire in 1800 and published it in his 1840 Ancient Music of Ireland collection under the title of The County of Tyrone. And the melody structure is unusual in that every line has a different melody, and the song is still being sung in our part of the world. So I'll move on to song number 3, and this is The Bleacher and the Weaver. The Bleacher and the Weaver is a song from the late 1790s which gives an insight into the politics in Ireland just before the passing of the Act of Union in 1801. It is written from the perspective of the bleachers, who were at the zenith of their power and control of the linen industry. On one level, this is a song in praise of the bleachers, weavers, and the linen trade, but the words have a much more sinister undertone. The subtitle of the song is A New and Patriotic Song. It describes in graphic detail, using the imagery of the linen process, the retribution that will be meted out to the enemies of Ireland, that is, to the United Irishmen, who were inspired by the ideals of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity. In 1798, they rose against the Protestant ascendancy, but were quickly suppressed and defeated. The song makes clever use of the descriptive imagery of the linen process to illustrate how their foes should be dealt with. There's a total of 22 processes in the preparation of linen, and all have a pugilistic connotation. There's no mistaking the threatening tone and the graphic description of the violence that would be used against traitors. The underlying theme of this song is about preserving the authority of the aristocratic minority, who would use any force necessary to defend their privileged way of life against those who would dare challenge and undermine their stranglehold on power. The melody for The Bleacher and the Weaver is Hearts of Oak. It was written by William Boyce, 1711 to 1759. He was a classical musician born in London. Several of his compositions were performed in Dublin during the first half of the 18th century. He wrote the rousing song Hearts of Oak in 1759. The lyrics were composed by the famous actor and theatre entrepreneur David Garrick, 1716 to 1779. The lyrics on the ballad sheet for this song have been written by a Mr. Lee Sud to localise it to the Ulster linen industry. The oak in the song's title refers to the wood from which warships were made during the Age of Sail. The heart of an oak tree is at the centre and provides the hardest woods. The Bleacher and the Weaver. Would you know how we bleachers and weavers intend of our country the wrongs and abuses to mend, to pluck up the cause of each grievance and tax? We'll manage our foes as we manage our flax. Hearts of oak are our bleachers, our weavers through men. We always are ready, steady boys, steady, to vote for our country again and again. And first by the roots we'll pluck up our foes, and steep in the ditch till they poison each nose. Then prostrate we'll spread them and scorch at the kiln, then bruise them and roll them and scotch at the mill. Hearts of oak are our bleachers, our weavers true men. We always are ready, steady boys, steady, to vote for our country again and again. All dripping we will take from the scald and the tub, to give them a bout of the beetle and the rub. And here, my brave boys, by themselves shall be felt a taste of the same which to Ireland they dealt. Hearts of oak are our bleachers, our weavers through men. We always are ready, steady boys, steady, to vote for our country again and again. Then here's to the bleacher who'd gladly export the bucks and the roppers and the lads of court. But a peace without stain we weavers will find, both sound of itself and honest of kind. Hearts of oak are our bleachers, our weavers through men. We always are ready, steady boys, steady. So here's Ponsonby's health again and again. Now, just to conclude, if we just about another minute or so, I'm going to finish with a few sayings from the trade. They had a great way with language and expressing themselves. So the first on this was an expression: never judge a woman or linen by candlelight. Number two, we're all familiar with the expressions about some people who wash their dirty linen in public, meaning they're relating some information or story, details that are best kept private. Number three, in Ulster, we have an idiom known as the half cut. When a weaver had woven 40 yards, or a cut, he was paid for his work. Too often he went to the inn and got cut with his money. Sometimes the linen merchant paid out a sub when a half cut was woven, that is 20 yards, hence the expression he's half cut, meaning that someone is half drunk. Currently, you could say there's a lot of there's a lot of shuttle diplomacy going on as we speak, taking place in politics, and a lot of us would say they have a few loose ends to tie up. So I'm now going to finish in the time-honoured fashion, and I'm going to wind up this presentation with those expressions about linen. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you indeed. Right. Lovely. Thank you, Maurice. I'm always gobsmacked. Each fortnight we have another 4 people or 3 people, and every time I think this is the best one we've ever had. But no doubt next one will be the best one we've ever had. But that was really good. Thank you to all 4 of our speakers. Can we have a round of applause, even if and we do have, technically we have 6 minutes, but we can overrun if we want to. If anybody wants to leave now, please do. And don't forget, we're not meeting in a fortnight's time. We're having a week off, or a fortnight off. But if anybody wants to raise their hand, and we'll spend another 15-20 minutes talking, don't forget that you go down to participants and raise your hand if you want to. Of course, I've lost my participants, but let me find them again. You go to participants, click on it, and there's a raise your hand option if anybody wants to comment or question. Okay, Liz Milner is our first one. Liz, are you there?
Okay, yeah. I've the only linen song I know is Jackson and Jane, and I was wondering if you have any background on it. I know it from hearing Paul Brady.
Yes, I have quite a bit on it, so maybe if I could talk to you outside this, I could give you a lot of information on that particular one. Okay, Liz, could you?
That'd be lovely. I'll send you my email.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll give you plenty of information.
So I think the email addresses for the 4 speakers have been circulated at the in the invitation to the meeting. So if you want to contact people direct, please do. I did have a blue hand came up and then it disappeared. Was it Marge? Marge, did you want to say something?
Hi, yeah. Questions for patients. Obviously, we don't have recordings of the informants that Campbell worked with, but when he was working with unaccompanied singers, I imagine he did, was there any attempt at all in notating that would document or account for rubato and what, or any kind of ornamentation or what might happen in unaccompanied song? Or did he always attempt to regularize things?
Karen, this one's for you.
I think that was for Karen.
Oh, Karen, I'm sorry. I'm very bad at names.
You need to unmute, Karen. Karen, you're muted. That's it.
And I have two
there are some manuscripts of some of the songs that he transcribed, but there's nothing about performance as a performance or how it was interpreted or anything. It's just tunes. So the only comments you get are the comments at the bottom of songs, or like I showed you on that score, in between the English and the Gaelic. In that case, there were some little notes about what things meant. So if he's got any extra information, he might say so and so's uncle told me that he heard this from a milkmaid on his farm 20 years ago.
But that wasn't the question.
There's nothing actually about they sang it slowly, or they sang it fast, or they sang it with a lilt, or they tended to put an accent here. Nothing like that at all.
So the tunes, in terms of how the transcriptions were actually done, was there any indication, if you were to read the transcription, of any kind of ornamentation or anything that would not be standard classical?
I don't think so. I haven't looked very closely at the tune books, because when I looked, what there was in the University of Edinburgh's library, it wasn't, and it doesn't exactly correlate to what's in the books anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
I didn't pay it a great deal of attention, other than thinking, oh right, these are books with tunes in. But I don't recall seeing anything that would have made me think this is really interesting as a transcription. The word he used was pricking them down. That was the word that you used at the time. And he literally had a manuscript book and he wrote the notes down. And I imagine he wrote some of the words. And
so the books as published would not be would certainly be lacking in terms of ethnomusicological standards.
I would have thought so, yeah. I mean, the books as published, what they basically show you is what Campbell considered to be an appropriate amount of ornamentation for the songs in a published form.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's how he heard them performed. It's how they ended up by the time he put them into print.
Gotcha. Well, I would have another question, but I'm sure other people want to ask questions. So I'll defer.
Margaret Bennett, hand up.
Thank you. I enjoyed all the talks immensely. This is a quick question from Karen. For Karen, did Campbell come across any Ossianic ballads? He came across James Macpherson, but did he come across any Ossianic ballads? Because there were many. And
I think he must have done, because he said that he got some verses.
Yeah.
So,
only 2 years ago I recorded a man in Barra reciting an Ossianic ballad, start to finish. It's remarkable. And in fact, in 1952, I think it was, Hamish Henderson recorded a blind Alistair Stewart, the tinker. Long tales. And his granddaughter, Essie, is still around telling those tales in Gaelic. So it's an amazing continuation of tradition, and really an unbroken line. I think actually Macpherson gets a raw deal because he couldn't produce the original poems, but it didn't mean to say they didn't exist, because they did.
Well, there was one thing where he said he deposited his manuscripts with his agent down in London. But if he had deposited manuscripts, if they were in Gaelic, then any disbelieving English person who went and looked at them wouldn't be any the wiser anyway. And I mean, as far as I remember, reading this is an article that somebody, I think from Aberdeen, wrote. I could give you the reference. But I have a feeling that nobody actually did go and look at the manuscripts that he produced.
I think Samuel Johnson really did a huge mischief to the whole theory, but he absolutely said that Macpherson was just an absolute charlatan, a rogue, and nobody should ever pay attention. And that really was all wrong. And
but there have been so many thousands of pages written about it.
Yes.
Seriously, I mean, many thousands of it. It's almost impossible to keep up with it all. So
I think people should listen. In the oral tradition, it's still there.
I mean, the funny thing is that the English things that that Macpherson first published read just like the King James Bible. So, you know, he's done a pretty good translation job anyway.
Yeah. But they were rather tuneless, I have to say.
Conrad, you've got your hand up. Still muted, Conrad.
I think Conrad needs to unmute himself.
Yes,
unmuting. I want to really thank, hearty thanks to Carol and Gwilym for their wonderful work, especially that it is contemporary and they're still out there and they're on the radio and they're here and there. A great way to go about business. I've been contemplating Gwilym's philosophy in his new book, and it's really quite amazing that he's been able to analyze the changes in folk culture in the British Isles over the past 50 years. Very enlightening and right to the point. I don't always agree with people, but in this case, it's great. But nobody agrees with me, we know that. Crazy.
Thanks for the plug, Conrad. Yes, we all need supporters.
Yeah.
Well, I want to have hearty cheers for your work and keep on going.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Find many, and they've also been very helpful for my research here with extending their materials. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Good.
You're welcome.
Nice.
Right, I don't have any other hands up yet. Does that mean we've got no more questions? What's the matter with you people? No? Nobody?
It's lunchtime in the US.
Oh, well, it's tea time here. Well,
it's tea time here, yeah.
I can always play some music on the flute machine here. Flutina.
Right. Lisa, now you've got your hand up. You need to unmute.
I just wanted to say what fascinated me about Gwilym and Carol and Davies' project was not only the beauty of its collecting, but it's sort of a template for how to do intensive community collecting as a voluntary and community effort that blends the collecting of the process with the reaching out. I come from the Folklore Society of Greater Washington, which Gwilym knows, and I think Carol knows too. And we work very hard at bringing music from the folk to the folk. We don't do a lot of, we do collecting. We're a multi-ethnic, very diverse community. So we put on a wonderful festival of multiple ethnic traditions, and we kind of specialize our collecting to places like the Library of Congress or to various certified folklorists who go out around in the country and collect important things. But the idea of, and I've looked at your model and thought, how can it apply to, especially in the pandemic, we think of new ways of collecting and moving out of our, and I love the fact that you harness so many aspects of your community, many of whom are not specialized ethnomusicologists, to doing serious both collecting and presenting work, including road shows. I mean, it's a very full package, and working in the schools. It's sort of like an instant microcosm of how folklore might be revitalized in your own community. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for your help to Gwilym when he was across the pond with you.
Absolutely.
One of the things is, because we got the grant from the Heritage Lottery Fund, one of their main premises is that you should be working with the local community.
Yeah.
So we were very keen to make sure that part was emphasized when we were doing the project. Yeah.
John Baxter has his hand up now. John?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say something about Gwilym and Carol's website. It really is good, but did you have a professional fundraiser to help you getting all those grants in? Because it's a very impressive list of people that were helping you out with the money, and quite often in the folk world, I think we're not very good at asking people for money, and I think we should be better. I just wondered if you had any reflections on that.
No, but that was done by the trustees, or a lot of it was done by myself, sending out emails, begging emails to people.
Most of the money came from the lottery fund, but local, you know, we just tried to think who could support us locally, and then emailed people, contacted people, you know, and I was really surprised how many came back saying, yes, we're prepared to help you. So it's really a question of going out there amongst the local community and finding these sources. They are out there, but they're not easy to find always.
Sometimes it was a small donation, say £50 or something. But one gentleman gave us £500, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
So you know, you get what you ask for, I suppose.
So,
it's all done by email, John.
Yeah.
Fine. I don't have any other hands up now, so we could wind up the meeting. Yes, everybody happy with that? Oh, yep. No, it's the same hands. Oh, Conrad wants to say something else. Hello, Conrad.
Unmuted. In regard to grants and funding, always, many people do, but sometimes it's always too late. When that funding is pulled out from under you, you have to have plan B. And that sometimes means being able to manage a website, learning a little bit of HTML, or doing what you're paying people to do. Find some volunteer to learn how to do that. And the more you work on it, the better you'll be when the time comes when the money is pulled out from under you, which happens all too often. So always plan B or C and get the volunteers there. Also, trust your material. If you have something that's valuable, a folk song, just put that out there for people. Make sure they can hear it. They've never heard it, most of them. Make sure they're in touch, as the folks have been doing, the Davies have been doing. Get it in their ears, and that's the best way. Just plan ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. Right, I think we're going to wind up the meeting, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming, as always. Thank you to our 4 speakers today. And as I keep saying, don't forget that we're not here in a fortnight's time, but we'll be back in a month's time. And then the one after that, in November the 29th, will be the special Jeff Warner Roy Palmer Memorial Lecture. So the next 2 are going to be even better than these ones. So thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you in a month's time. Very well.